Hello there BookTube, how are you doing? Today I'm going to try and do the Effed Up Books tag, which was originally created by Daniel over at Guilty Feet, and I was very kindly tagged by AJ Dunn Reads and Writes, both channels I love and go back to time and time again, yeah, it was a joy to try and do this tag, so we'll see how it goes. It might be quite short because I don't really have answers for all of them, but yeah, we'll see. So the first prompt is a book that was effed up in a good way, and for this I thought I'd go with a poetry collection, a fairly famous poetry collection, which is Crow by Ted Hughes, and these are these kind of disgusting, almost nihilistic poems that are kind of, I don't know, in a way, Hughes making sense of grief and all this sort of, I don't know, negative, yeah, such kind of negativity that he's finding in the world, and yeah, it's kind of, it gets a bit intense, very grotesque in places, but I still really enjoy it and love it, and there's a hope in it, even though it is well and truly effed up. So that's Crow by Ted Hughes. And then next up, a book that was effed up in a bad way. And I don't really have an answer for this. Not for a book that I can show at least, though I thought of J.G. Ballard's Crash, which was like a set text at uni, and if you don't know what goes on in that book, if you haven't heard of it or read it, if you're feeling up to it, maybe just read the synopsis on Wikipedia or something, and it will give you an idea of it. And for me, that's kind of my limit. I think I can't really deal with much more than that. And then the third prompt, a book that everyone loved but you think is just effed up. And I can't really think of anything in this one either. Yeah, I don't know, maybe it's just because I haven't really read that many books that have been, yeah, sort of recommended on BookTube. But I've read a few, but yeah, very few that I would describe as effed up, or at least in a way that was effed up, that was too much for me. So yeah, I don't really have an answer for that. Then prompt number 4 is Sexy A Effed Up, which again, this is another one I don't really have an answer for. I think when if like sex is done kind of well in a book, I kind of don't really notice it as much, and it's only really if it's kind of done badly and written badly and awkwardly that I notice it, and it's not necessarily anything messed up, anything weird about it that draws attention to it. It's more just the bad writing. And so again, this is one that I can't really think of answering. And then Effed Up for kids, I'll probably just say anything by Roald Dahl, I think. Yeah, the more I think about Roald Dahl books, the more I think, particularly his kids' books, the more I think they're, yeah, a bit weird. And then an Effed Up classic. This is one that I've read and quite enjoyed, but don't have at the moment, which is The Monk by Matthew Lewis, about a monk's kind of slow decline. You know, he starts off as this really charismatic monk, very pious, and people are, you know, are kind of queuing outside the church to hear him preaching when he preaches at the church, and then he meets this girl, or sees this girl at church, and yeah, his slow decline kind of comes with his temptation, his attraction to her, and he meets this other, I think it's supposed to be a I don't know, another young monk that turns out to be a woman in disguise, and then it turns out she's a witch, and then it turns out that actually she's probably a demon in disguise, and it just gets weirder and weirder, and eventually there's like the Spanish Inquisition come in, and there's all sorts of horrible things happening, and it's over the top gothic horror, and yeah, it is actually quite a fun book in its own way, but a lot of weird stuff going on in The Monk by Matthew Lewis. Then we have Efftup in translation, and this is another one where I can show you. It's exciting, isn't it? This is The History of Danish Dreams by Peter Hoig, and not necessarily the whole book is messed up, but there's just this one strand of a story about a preacher, and I think him and his wife, they move, or maybe she's not even his wife, but a kind of mistress or something, I can't remember, but they move to this town that's really run down, that's, you know, kind of far away from everywhere. I think it's almost permanently flooded. Everyone's always depressed, and no one has any work. Everyone's like an alcoholic, and he decides to move there, not necessarily because of any real calling, but because he has syphilis and he's going mad, and he has these really weird visions that I think are are symptoms of syphilis, and then he has a daughter with his wife, and they believe that she's gifted, that she's like a chosen one, and I think the wife dies, but the daughter, you know, she grows up and he sees that she's different, and she has some kind of strange heavenly calling that he's seeing in her life, and so him and then the kind of faithful that he's sort of managed to bring around himself in this village, his little cult almost, decide to keep her locked up in like a golden cage, and when they go on their mission trips, they carry her around in her golden cage, and it's kind of, yeah, it's very disturbing and really messed up, and I think she eventually escapes and kind of rebels, and on the whole this is a very weird, wacky but kind of fun book, but that's probably the most messed up element of the book in it, and it was originally written in Swedish, no, Danish, sorry, obviously, it says it right there. Anyway, and then we have Efftup in nonfiction, number 8, and then number 9, illustrated Efftup, and I thought I would marry these two together. I don't really have like a proper answer. I was kind of looking for both of these, and I couldn't really find anything that really satisfied me, so instead I thought I'd show you this. This is Sad Animal Facts by Brooke Barker, and it is what it says on the tin. It's loads of sad animal facts with cute cartoons of animals. This is a really good one I quite like. Black eagles watch their children fight to the death without interfering, and then that was the illustration. So there you go, and just in case you have any problems, just say non-fiction on the back, and it is illustrated, and I think there are many things about the animal kingdom which, although it is natural and we just have to be like, yeah, that's the natural world, it's still pretty messed up, and there you go. And then finally, I'm going to struggle with the name here, so it's Hanya, what's it, Yanagihara's A Little Left Up, a book that is just misery porn solely designed to convince you how effed up the world is. And I sort of struggled with this question, mainly because even though there are, you know, certain kind of really weird, messed up books that I maybe wouldn't want to read, I don't necessarily read them solely because I think they're just going to tell me how, you know, how awful the world is, because there are very, very few books that I come across that don't have a certain amount of like hope in them, I suppose. So yeah, the first example I would bring up would maybe be Crow again by Ted Hughes. You know, and there's a poem early on in it which is one of my favourites. You know, called "Examination at the Womb Door," which is very weird. It has this kind of very repetitive, you know, refrain going through it. You know, who owns these scrawny little feet? Death. Who owns this bristly, scorched-looking face? Death. And it goes on and on and on. And you know, who is stronger than hope? Death. Who is stronger than the will? Death. Who is stronger than love? Death. Who is stronger than life? Death. But who is stronger than death? Me, evidently. And just that little bit of humour at the end from our little crow character here, you know, a little sense of humour in there. It's like a little light in this very, very gloomy poem. And there are very few books where I don't think there's something else going on beyond all the messed up stuff in it. Even a book that I can't really stomach, like Crash, you know, I do know that you know, there is something beyond what is happening in the book that the author's trying to convey. You know, my only problem with Crash is that I just don't want to know what it is. I don't want to go through all that stuff before finding out, you know, what it is the author wants to say. But you know, I think there are little lights of hope everywhere, even in the most depressing books. You know, and even in a book that, at least my idea of it before reading, was supposed to be really depressing, Nausea by Jean-Paul Sartre. You know, I thought it was just going to be a proper downer existentialist book, and you know, it is, you know, sort of cornerstone in existentialism. But I was like laughing all the way through this, and again, the ending of this book, at least for me, I found it's really hopeful and life-affirming. And so I find it really hard to find a book that, you know, is just miserable and showing you how awful life is, because often there's something else going on, and it's maybe just up to you as the reader to see past the misery and to find it for yourself, or at least that's my experience as a reader. So there we go, that's the Efftup books tag for me. I probably didn't do very well. I suppose I don't read as much sort of contemporary literary fiction, and I think maybe people who focus more on that sort of stuff would fare a bit better, or maybe people who like horror maybe. But I gave it a go, and now is the question of who to tag, and I don't have an answer right now, so I'm going to come back in a second and tell you. Right, got my trusty notebook with people. I've written down a few channels that I wanted to tag in the future, and I've picked two. So there's Alicia Reads and Rambles, yeah, new to me channel, but yeah, very fun. And then Matthew Nightbird Books, again a fairly new channel, but a really great channel. I really enjoy the videos that he's done so far. And again, I'd love to see what you think, yeah, what you think an Efftup book is and what examples you give. But that's everything for now. Thanks for bearing with, and I hope you're doing well wherever you are. But that's all for now. Take care. Bye bye.